Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 8 Part 41 based on novel. So let's start. Over the next 2 days, the population in Unique Devil City soared at an extremely terrifying speed. Not only did members from the 8 super sects arrive one after another, but even members from other renowned factions also hurried over. In an instant, the interior of Unique Devil City was completely packed with countless experts, causing it to become extremely chaotic. Chi Lei and the rest had clearly tightened their control amidst this chaos. Hence, most disciples from Dao sect had to quietly remain at their inn to train and had no chance to go out to stir trouble. Although Chi Lei's group did not forcefully restrain Lin Dong and the other top disciples, they repeatedly instructed them to be careful in order to guard against a sneak attack. Currently, Unique Devil City was extremely chaotic. Should any problems occur, it was likely that even the 4 of them would have difficulty handling it. Lin Dong was also clearly aware of the current situation within Unique Devil City. Hence, he quietly remained in his room during these 2 days despite not being grounded, and he seldom headed out. Lin Dong also took advantage of the peace that came before the imminent great battle to study some other things. For example, the strange copper cauldron that he had recently obtained. Lin Dong was seated on a bed within the quiet room. At this moment, he was holding the damaged copper cauldron which he had bought from the treasure-seeking district at a high price. He frowned slightly while his eyes continuously swept across it. Sigh. This continued for half an hour before Lin Dong involuntarily sighed. He rubbed his somewhat teary eyes while his face was filled with dissatisfaction. Earlier, he had tried various methods to study this dark red copper cauldron. However, he did not manage to discover anything special about it. The material of this copper cauldron was not unique, and there was also the absence of any energy fluctuation within it. Lin Dong was certain that this thing was definitely not a soul treasure. It seemed like his dream of finding a great steel had been dashed. Something's amiss. Lin Dong played with the copper cauldron in his hand as he muttered to himself. When he saw this thing for the first time, he clearly sensed the stone talisman within his body trembling gently. The stone talisman only displayed such a reaction when it found an extraordinary object. Lin Dong frowned. He placed the dark red damaged copper cauldron in front of him. It was possible to see some chaotic drawings on the surface of the copper cauldron. Perhaps it was because of the erosion over the years, but these drawings were extremely faded. Hence, Lin Dong was unable to obtain any useful information from them. This copper cauldron, just what is its use? Lin Dong felt his head ache a little. A long while later, he finally gave up and shook his head. As he was preparing to keep the cauldron into his Qiankun bag, his eyes suddenly drifted towards the light in the room. Immediately, he was stunned for a moment. After which, his eyes narrowed. This copper cauldron seems to be lacking a flame. This thought flashed across Lin Dong's mind. He hesitated for a moment before he looked at the damaged appearance of the copper cauldron. It did not seem like it could endure the heat. Should things take a turn for the worse, his 10 million nirvana pills would be wasted. If it ends up being broken, then so be it. However, Lin Dong was not an indecisive person. After hesitating for a moment, he clenched his teeth. With a grasp of his hand, a cluster of fierce nirvana flames rose from his palm. This flame could be formed by anyone who was a nirvana stage expert. Lin Dong flicked his finger. A wisp of flame entered the copper cauldron at lightning speed. After which, the flame was swiftly released. Soon after, Lin Dong could see that the copper cauldron was starting to melt. Immediately, his face turned slightly green. It seemed that his idea was indeed wrong. Moreover, based on its damaged appearance, it was possible that someone had already tried this method. However, it was likely that they had realized that it was useless midway, and hence stopped. Lin Dong shook his head in disappointment. He had finally lost all interest. With a wave of his sleeve, he threw the burning copper cauldron into the brazier in the room. After which, he slowly shut his eyes and began cultivating. After Lin Dong had entered a state of cultivation, the copper cauldron began to melt at an increasing pace. In the end, it even turned into liquid copper that dripped downwards. The dark red copper liquid increased. In the end, the copper cauldron was completely melted down. The nirvana flame had also scattered due to the exhaustion of nirvana chi. Only some slowly flowing dark red copper liquid remained. Numerous dark red lights suddenly shot out from the copper liquid while it flowed. Finally, they intertwined with each other in the air. Seated on the bed, as if he had sensed something, Lin Dong's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. He was somewhat dazed as he watched the dark red lights intertwining in the air. Lin Dong was startled when he saw this scene. After which, he glanced at the completely melted metal cauldron, and only then did he come to a sudden realization. One must completely destroy it before one could find what was hidden within. Could this be considered as, without destruction there can be no progress? However, one would require quite a great amount of courage in order to go through with such an act. If it was not because Lin Dong was completely disappointed earlier, it was likely that he would have difficulty personally melting the cauldron into liquid copper. Before Lin Dong, there was likely others who had also tried this method. Ultimately, that person lacked the endurance or the heartlessness to see things to the end. Regardless, the current Lin Dong was exceptionally pleased. This outcome that he had haphazardly reached clearly exceeded his expectation. However, what is this? Lin Dong's joyous eyes contained some uncertainty. He stared at the lights crisscrossing each other in the air. Those lights entwined with each other. Finally, they appeared to have formed some strange lines and pictures. That appearance, it seemed to be a map. A map? Lin Dong's eyes focused slightly. Immediately, a thought flashed past his mind before his mental energy whizzed out. It captured an image of the map of light and stored it in his Niwen palace. After Lin Dong had done this, the bright red lines began to shrink before finally agglomerating into a dark red palm-sized light token in front of his eyes. Lin Dong extended his hand and the dark red light token landed in his hand. His eyes glanced over it and he was able to see a picture of a flame spreading across the light token. There were 4 unusually ancient flaming characters vaguely present on the picture. Burning Sky Ancient Stash. Lin Dong stared at the 4 ancient flaming characters. After which, he read each word out loud. In the next instant, his eyes suddenly brightened. This copper cauldron actually hid an ancient treasure map. Excellent. Lin Dong's lips parted as he laughed. Although he was unaware of what this Burning Sky Ancient Stash was, it was likely not an ordinary treasure trove since it was located within unique Devil region. It would not be surprising even if such a place had a pure Yuan treasure. Although the trashy item did not turn into a treasure, the appearance of this ancient treasure map had completely made up for it. The value of an ancient treasure trove was definitely comparable to a pure Yuan treasure. He did not lose out in this transaction. The ability of the stone talisman did not disappoint Lin Dong. After entering unique Devil region, I can discuss this with senior sister Xiao Xiao and the rest. We can look for this so-called Burning Sky Ancient Stash together. Lin Dong fondled his chin and muttered to himself. After all, the current situation was different from when he had entered the ancient battlefield back then. He was no longer alone and there was now a large group of fellow disciples who were willing to follow him. He alone was also unable to stomach an entire ancient treasure trove. It would be better for him to share it with his fellow disciples. At that time, their overall strength would increase and it was likely that they would face a lot less trouble. Lin Dong quietly smiled when he thought of this. He carefully kept the light token into his Qiankun bag. This object likely has a special function. Otherwise, it would not have been hidden so well. After resolving the secret of the copper cauldron, Lin Dong clearly felt extremely pleased. However, he did not stop here. Instead, he mused for a moment before he suddenly clapped his hands together. A light glow appeared in his hand and transformed into an extremely obscure and complicated light formation. This formation was so mysterious that it caused one to be dazzled. Even the current Lin Dong was unable to see through its mystery. This was naturally the ancient universe formation that was within Lin Dong's body. The ancient universe formation had greatly contributed to Lin Dong's ability to contend against 9 Yuan Nirvana stage experts with his 7 Yuan Nirvana stage strength. It was because of it that Lin Dong was able to merge yuan power and mental energy together to unleash an even greater power. However, ever since Lin Dong had obtained it, he had not discovered any other uses besides merging yuan power and mental energy. Nevertheless, over this period of time, Lin Dong had realized some facts after having quietly studied it for a long time. The ancient universe formation could merge energy when it was rotated clockwise. However, if one was to rotate it anticlockwise, Lin Dong discovered that the ripple from the ancient universe formation would undergo a complete change. At the same time, that fluctuation also possessed quite a shocking and miraculous effect. That was the power to split. Clockwise would lead to merger while anticlockwise would lead to separation. Lin Dong smilingly watched the slowly rotating ancient universe formation while the corners of his lips lifted. He was aware that this discovery would definitely aid him tremendously in the upcoming Great Sect competition. As the explosive atmosphere in Unique Devil City seemed to reach an almost crazed state, 2 days finally sped by. As the first ray of sunlight pierced through the clouds and illuminated the land, a frenzy undoubtedly erupted throughout the entire Unique Devil City. Ear-piercing wind sounds continuously rang through the skies as figure after figure rushed to enter Unique Devil region like screaming locusts. At a place not far to the north of Unique Devil City, the ground had completely transformed into an extremely gloomy darkness. A smell that caused one's soul to feel uncomfortable spread out from the ground. Unique Devil region was enveloped by an extremely frightening array that originated from ancient times. It was said that this array was created by the combined efforts of many elite experts of that era, and that this array had sealed this piece of land for countless years. However, there was nothing in this world that could withstand the erosion of time. Although this array was extremely terrifying, under the passing of time, a few broken holes had appeared. Thus, people are able to enter from certain points. The outskirts of Unique Devil City was one of these points. This was a stretch of black plains. At the end of the plains, traces of distortion had appeared, a clear indicator of where the plains ended. Right now, there was a huge crowd that blotted the skies above the plains. Hurried wind sounds continuously sounded out in the distance, clearly expanding the already frighteningly vast crowd present. A large group of figures shot forward, before finally appearing at a place around 1,000 meters from the spatial protective screen. Revealing their appearances, they were the Dao sect disciples. Lin Dong and the rest were naturally among this group. Truly a magnificent sight. Floating in the air, the group looked at the vast endless crowd surrounding them, before they involuntarily smacked their lips. This was undoubtedly a grand occasion for Eastern Xian region. The only words that could describe this scene would be vast and mighty. Feeling rather shocked, Lin Dong nodded his head. Amongst the figures that blotted the skies, he could sense that there were quite a few obscure and powerful auras. One could tell that there were crouching tigers and hidden dragons amongst them, however, no one knew how many there were. Sure enough, the Great Sect competition was a gathering of monsters. Lin Dong's eyes swept across the skies, before suddenly coming to a rest on a group of figures far away with longswords on their back. Their bodies gave off swift and fierce sword chi. It was so sharp to the point that it seemed able to pierce through the world. Lin Dong's eyes swept across the group of figures before focusing on the front of the group. There stood a man who did not seem to look anything special, however, the sharp aura from his body caused even Lin Dong's pupils to shrink a little. Those are the Sword Sect disciples. They are headed by the most outstanding person amongst the Sword Sect's younger generation. Known as Sword Fanatic Xueling, he is also at the peak of the 9 Yuan Nirvana stage. It is rumored that he has successfully learned the Sword Saint arts of the Sword Sect, and his attacking prowess is extremely fearsome and ferocious. Just as Lin Dong's gaze landed on that man, standing beside him, Ying Xiaoxiao opened her mouth and explained. "Oh," said Lin Dong as he faintly raised his eyebrows. He had heard of the Sword Saint arts. It was reputed to be a powerful martial art that was not inferior to the Sky Emperor's scripture. The people in white on the left as well as the people in yellow not far from them are the disciples from Divine Sect and Symbol Valley respectively. This time, the most formidable younger generation member of Divine Sect is a girl called Shui Wan. As for the disciple leading Symbol Valley, he is called Mao Shan. Both their mental energy capabilities have already reached the 9 Seal Heavenly Symbol Master level. Their attacking methods are intangible and unpredictable, making them extremely hard to deal with, continued Ying Xiaoxiao as she pointed towards two different spots. Following her finger, Lin Dong turned and saw a girl in a white dress standing gracefully in front of the group of figures dressed in white. She looked rather refined, however, her most distinguishing feature was her snow-white hair. As a gentle breeze blew past, her hair was akin to snowflakes fluttering and dancing. Majestic and incorporeal mental energy undulated around her, causing even space itself to distort a little. Lin Dong's eyes rested on the girl named Shui Yang for a short while, before turning to the direction where the Symbol Valley members were located. At that spot, stood a youth wearing a large yellow robe. The surface of his yellow robe was filled with strange and weird symbols, while light faintly blossomed from it. From the looks of it, this yellow robe was actually a fairly powerful soul treasure. Furthermore, the mental energy fluctuations from his body were not the least bit inferior to the white-haired girl. 9 Seal Heavenly Symbol Master. Lin Dong faintly smacked his lips. His mental energy was merely at the 6 Seal Heavenly Symbol Master level, and he was quite weak in comparison to the two of them. After all, Lin Dong had spent more time on Yuan power than mental energy. The people over there should be from Great Desolate Palace, right? After sighing, Lin Dong looked towards another direction, where a group of burly chaps stood. Many of them had exposed arms, while the veins on their bodies were like dragons. Undulations radiated from their bodies like a great flood, causing them to look as if they were human-shaped demonic beasts. After sweeping his gaze across their bodies, Lin Dong's eyes came to a halt at the front of the group before gawking slightly. At that spot stood a rather thin man. As he stood in front of the group of intrepid giant bodies, he looked just like a kid. Such a contrast was extremely comical. Naturally, the startled expression on Lin Dong's face only lasted for a split second before dissipating, as he noticed the looks of respect the burly chaps gave to the thin man. Yep, that thin man is the most senior brother disciple of Great Desolate Palace, Wu Hong. Don't look down on his physique. His physical body has been already trained till an extremely intrepid level. It was said that there was once a 9 Yuan Nirvana stage expert that challenged him whose defenses were directly smashed by a single punch. Even his Nirvana golden body was completely broken, causing him to sustain serious injuries, said Ying Xiaoxiao while nodding her head. As expected, this is a gathering of monsters, replied Lin Dong with a faint smile. To be able to become the most outstanding member amongst their peers within their individual sects, these people have truly proven their talent and capabilities. This great sect competition was truly going to be very interesting. Ying Xiaoxiao nodded her head and was just about to say something when her expression suddenly changed. As she gazed into the distance she said, the 9 Heaven Supreme Purity Palace members have also arrived. Lin Dong also raised his head and looked towards the direction where wind sounds were present. After a few breaths' time, a large group of figures appeared in the sky. Following the appearance of this group, the air above the plane started to grow restless as fiery gazes converged one after another on the front of the group of 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace disciples. At that spot was a beautiful figure in a white dress akin to snow. Treading on a green lotus and with a quiet and cold temperament akin to a fairy descending to the mortal realm, she was indeed Ling Qingshu. As Lin Dong gazed at Ling Qingshu, he involuntarily rubbed his nose. When she appeared, he noticed that a great half of the most outstanding disciples from the various sects had all turned to look at her. Within their gazes were unconcealable admiration. Looks like the words that Ling Qingshu had said 2 days ago was indeed not a lie. Eh? As Lin Dong's gaze swept past Ling Qingshu, he suddenly exclaimed in shock. His surprised gaze had stopped at a spot behind Ling Qingshu. He had spotted the figure of a familiar young lady. It was Su Ru. Currently, the young lady was wearing a light green dress. Her face no longer had the previous timid look and a smile had appeared when she conversed with the senior and junior brother disciples around her. Looks like the young lady who had to pretend to toughen up while being reprimanded by the Lin Dong trio had finally grown up. In the distance, Su Ru, who was talking to her senior and junior brother disciples, seemed to have sensed something. Raising her head, she turned towards the direction of Dao sect. In the next moment, she spotted the gentle smile on the familiar face that was looking at her. Big brother Lin Dong. Suru gawked for a moment. Soon after, pleasant surprise and an excited smile appeared on her face. In the next moment, she waved at Lin Dong without care for the surrounding gazes. Looking at the exceptionally pleasantly surprised Suru, Lin Dong gave a faint smile in response. Suru's action were obviously discovered to the Dao sect disciples beside Lin Dong. Gawking for a while, they proceeded to look at Lin Dong in worship. Why did everyone know this guy? Your networking seems to reach rather far and wide, said Ying Xiaoxiao before she involuntarily shook her head. She looked to Ying Huanhuan, who was currently chatting with Qing Yi. She looked as if she was not aware of what was going on. However, Ying Xiaoxiao could discover a subtle change within her gaze which occasionally fluttered to a distant place. It was obvious that she could not completely ignore this matter. A friend that I got to know during the 100 Empire War, explained Lin Dong with a smile, before shooting a look at Ying Huanhuan who was still refusing to speak to him. He secretly felt helpless. This little lady's sulking capabilities were indeed rather exceptional. At the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace area, Ling Qingzhu was slightly startled due to Suru's actions, before asking in a soft voice, "Do you know him?" "Yes, if not for big brother Lin Dong, during the 100 Empire War, me and elder brother would have likely not reached the 100 Empire Mountain," replied Suru with a smile as she nodded her head. Big brother Lin Dong is formidable. It was obvious that he came from a low-rank empire. However, he managed to become the champion of the 100 Empire War. In the end, when the Western Xian region attempted to capture the ancient realm, he forced our enemies to retreat by summoning 3 wind-lighting tribulations. Suru's face was filled with the color of worship. Seeing this, some of the male disciples around her felt slightly jealous. That was because they had never seen her reveal such an expression during her time in Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace, where her status was high like the afternoon sun. Ling Qingzhu gently nodded her head, her eyebrows drooped slightly as she suppressed the slight fluctuation that flashed past her eyes. It seems like he had quite a few extraordinary experiences over all these years. Lin Dong gradually withdrew his gaze from the location of the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace, before turning his head towards another area in the sky. In a soft voice he spoke, "The people from Yuan Gate have arrived." As his words faded, the expressions of the Dao sect disciples behind faintly sunk. They raised their heads and fixed their gazes on a particular spot in the sky. Under their gazes, hurried wind sounds quickly rang out as a black mass of figures burst in like black clouds in a rather overbearing manner, before finally appearing at a spot that was nearest to the spatial distortions. When this large group of figures appeared, Lin Dong's attention instantly went towards the front of this group of Yuan Gate disciples. At that position, 3 figures stood perfectly straight. An aura that rocketed through the sky slowly erupted from them, causing the expressions of many people to change. The 3 little kings of Yuan Gate, the most outstanding existences amongst the younger generation members in Eastern Xian region. The 3 most highly regarded individuals in the great sect competition had finally appeared. Hundreds of Yuan Gate disciples formed an orderly formation in the air. The majestic ripple that exuded from their bodies gathered together, causing a muffled thunder to resound in the sky. It was a sight that would cause eyebrows to be raised. 3 figures stood at the very front of all the Yuan Gate disciples. The auras from these 3 may not be as impressive when compared to the combined presence of the hundreds of people behind them, but they were as imposing as 3 large mountains that stood in front of the Yuan Gate disciples. No one dared to underestimate them. Lin Dong's eyes had also narrowed slightly due to the appearance of these 3 figures. He had once met the Little Lightning King, Lei Qian, amongst them. Therefore, his gaze directly looked towards the latter's left. There he saw a handsome white-clothed man that was holding a foldable fan. The fan was flapped slightly, giving him a graceful and scholarly appearance. However, the waves of powerful fluctuation seeping out from him allowed one to understand that it would be extremely foolish to treat him as a helpless scholar. "He is the little spirit king, Lingzhen," Ying Xiaoxiao softly said. Her face was somewhat solemn as she stared at the white-clothed man. Lin Dong nodded slightly. His eyes had also become quite grave. He was able to sense that this little spirit king, Lingzhen, seemed to be even more dangerous than Lei Qian. Yuan Gate was indeed worthy of being the strongest sect within the Eastern Xian region. It It was possible to see this just from the gap between the disciples from the various sects. However, the strongest of the Yuan Gate three little kings are not these two. Instead, it is little Yuan King Yuan Kang. Ying Xiaoxiao's eyes were a little complicated. Her voice seemed slightly hoarse when she uttered this name. It was clear that the name gave her immense pressure. Lin Dong nodded quietly. Soon after, his eyes looked towards the spot between Lei Qian and Ling Shen. A blue-clothed man with an ordinary appearance was standing there with a smile. His appearance was not as fearsome as what Lin Dong had imagined. However, countless gazes were gathered on the blue-clothed man while he smilingly stood in front of the Yuan Gate disciples. That ability to draw attention was not any weaker than Ling Qingzhu's. Lin Dong glanced at the other super sects. The monsters from the various sects would have a somewhat unnatural expression when they looked at Yuan Kang. Caution flashed across their eyes. Their demeanor clearly indicated that they were extremely fearful of him. From this scene, even Lin Dong had no choice but to admit that the Yuan Kang's presence was indeed powerful. The leader of the three little kings lived up to his reputation. The blue-clothed Yuan Kang turned his head under the focus of those uncountable gazes in the sky. After which, he threw his gaze towards the direction where the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace was located. Of course, to be specific, it was towards Ling Qingzhu, who was standing on a green lotus. Ha ha, this time around, it is indeed Ling Qingzhu who is leading the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. If we end up meeting in Unique Devil Region, I hope that Ling Qingzhu will hold back a little. Yuan Kang looked at Ling Qingzhu. That face, which was not handsome but still nevertheless attractive, involuntarily broke out into a smile. After which, he gently laughed. It must be said that this Yuan Kang was a man with great charm. Although he was not really handsome, his demeanor when he spoke caused one to appear to be bathed in the winds of spring. Without realizing it, the caution within one's heart would gradually weaken. Martial brother Yuan Kang is joking. Qingzhu does not have that ability. Ling Qingzhu lowered her long eyelashes in response to Yuan Kang's words and softly replied. After uttering those words, Ling Qingzhu's eyes secretly glanced towards the distance without anyone noticing. It was the direction where Lin Dong currently was. Qingzhu is really humble. If you go all out, even I might not be able to easily obtain victory. Yuan Kang laughed. After which, he withdrew his eyes a little. He turned his head and looked towards the direction where the disciples from the Dao sect were located. The moment that Yuan Kang's eyes looked over, Lin Dong was able to sense that the bodies of all the Dao sect disciples behind him momentarily tense up. Even the Yuan power within Ying Xiaoxiao and Wang Yang's bodies involuntarily circulated in a more hurried manner. Ying Xiaoxiao, Wang Yang, aha, all of you can be considered to be acquaintances. Yuan Kang smilingly looked at Ying Xiaoxiao and the rest as he spoke. The expressions of the Wang Yang duo sunk slightly. Although Yuan Chang's voice was gentle, they could sense the surging dark and cold bloodthirstiness beneath the surface. Yuan Kang once again smiled after seeing the expressions of the Ying Xiaoxiao duo. His eyes eventually paused on Lin Dong, as those long eyes of his narrowed a little. I have heard that the champion of this 100 Empire War has rejected the invitation of my Yuan Gate and entered Dao sect instead. Now that I look at it, your Dao sect had indeed managed to gain quite a lot. Yuan Kang smiled. His voice paused for a moment before continuing, this may be good as well, rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of a snake. Yuan Kang's laughter immediately caused the eyes of quite a number of Dao sect disciples to be furious. These words were saying that Lin Dong was only able to be a leader due to the weakness of their Dao sect. If Lin Dong had went to their Yuan Gate instead, Lin Dong would only be ranked last. This fellow might appear amiable, but his words were like needles hidden within cotton, piercing one until even one's bones would hurt. The original clamor in the sky had also become silent at this moment. Those members of the various super sects were watching this scene. The grudge between Yuan Gate and Dao sect was extremely deep. Everyone present was aware of it. However, they did not expect that hidden sparks and turmoil would appear the moment they met. However, from the looks of it, it seemed that Dao sect was unable to beat Yuan Gate. From the area where the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace was located, Ling Qingzhu's brows knitted together slightly. She glanced at Su Ruo beside her. The latter's small face was covered with worry. Clearly, she was also aware of the gap between the disciples from Dao sect and Yuan Gate. Chicken head or snake tail? It is too early to come to a conclusion now. Lin Dong's expression did not contain the slightest fear in front of the many gathered gazes from all over the place. He laughed. Back then, didn't my Dao sect's senior Jutong also beat your Yuan Gate's 3 little kings till one was killed, one was injured and one had fled? Some uproar was stirred in the sky when these words were spoken. Quite a number of people had shock-filled faces. Clearly, they did not expect that Lin Dong actually dared to clash against Yuan Kang. Arrogant fool that does not know your limits. Don't tell me that you dare to compare yourself to Jutong. Lei Qian laughed coldly and mocked. Even Jutong had difficulty escaping from being killed by my Yuan Gate. The little spirit king, Lingzhen, who was holding a foldable fan, said with a smile. A sect master of Yuan Gate can lower himself to attack a disciple of Dao sect. This has indeed caused others to be dumbfounded. Lin Dong laughed. Lingzhen and Lei Qian frowned slightly when they heard these words. The smiles on their faces turned a little unnatural. The Jutong from back then did indeed only possess the status of a disciple. However, he had ended up forcing the sect master of Yuan Gate to intervene. Only then was he killed. This matter had ended up attracting some hidden ridicule, causing the reputation of Yuan Gate to be damaged. It could be considered a sore point in the hearts of their disciples. During the time that Lei Qian's expression was gloomy and could not help but wish to say something, Yuan Kang in front of him waved his hand. His long narrow eyes contained a small smile as he stared at Lin Dong. However, the smile was filled with a dark and intense chillness. Looks like we have not put your Dao sect disciples sufficiently in their place over these years. Yuan Kang curled his mouth and smiled. Immediately, he shook his head. His eyes were like that of a snake as they swept over all the members of Dao sect. He softly said, "In that case, all of you should pray for yourselves during this great sect competition." His voice did not reveal any overtly vicious words. However, the ill intent could be clearly heard by everyone. Some things should not be said till the end. The smile on Lin Dong's face withdrew bit by bit. Both of his eyes vaguely contained a dark glow surging within them. Under his sleeves, his fists had also tightened. He was aware that he would have to really go all out during this great sect competition no matter what. You are bold. I like that. When the time comes, I will say these words to you once again. Hopefully, it will not be the last words that you hear in your life. Yuan Kang laughed faintly. After which, he slowly withdrew his eyes. His fingers were crossed and placed in front of him. Lei Qian and Lingzhen, who were familiar with his character, revealed a cold smile on their lips when they saw this. They were aware that such a moment was when the murderous desire within Yuan Kang's heart had reached its peak. Clearly, Lin Dong had already provoked a murderous intent from Yuan Kang. Dao sect was truly unlucky. Lin Dong also withdrew his gaze when Yuan Kang did so. He turned his head to glance at Ying Xiaoxiao and the rest. Their faces did not show even the slightest dissatisfaction because of his earlier provocations towards Yuan Kang. Instead, quite a number of them had icy cold stern expressions. Can that Yuan Kang be considered the strongest person amongst the youngest generation of the Eastern Xian region? Lin Dong inquired softly. Ying Xiaoxiao thought for a moment after hearing this. She immediately shook her head and said, "There is one person who is not weaker than him." Who? The first on the sect's wanted list, Ghost Mask Chen Gui. Ying Xiaoxiao said. Chen Gui. Lin Dong frowned. It was clear that this was the first time he had heard this name. He is not a disciple of any sect. Moreover, he cannot even be considered someone from the Eastern Xian region. This person appears and disappears like a ghost. An ordinary person would have difficulty finding his traces. It is rumored that he had once exchanged blows with Yuan Kang, but Yuan Kang was unable to emerge victorious. From the side, Wang Yang opened his mouth and explained. So it's like this. Lin Dong muttered to himself. It seemed that this eastern Xian region was really filled with many hidden experts. He wondered whether Chen Gui would appear during this great sect competition. The unique devil region is about to be opened? Ying Xiaoxiao suddenly said while Lin Dong was deep in thought. Lin Dong raised his head when he heard this. He saw some ripples start to appear on the spatial barrier in the distance. This unique devil region was about to open. While the unique devil region was in a state where it was about to open, 2 rays of light flashed past the sky 500 kilometers away at lightning speed. Junior sister disciple, there is no need to be too anxious. We will make it in time for the great sect competition. The 2 rays of light were positioned one behind the other. The light figure behind suddenly paused for a moment, before speaking somewhat helplessly. That light figure was revealed the moment it paused. There was half a ghost mask on his face, giving him a somewhat eerie ghost-like appearance. Who is as slow as you? There is no need to follow me if you do not wish to go. I can go by myself. However, that light figure at the front did not slow down because of this. Soon after, a clear young lady's voice was emitted. Immediately, her speed suddenly quickened as she rushed towards the horizon. That ghost mask person involuntarily laughed bitterly and shook his head when he saw this. He could only follow behind quickly. The conversation of these 2 echoed in a faint manner. Is junior sister disciple looking for someone? Who is it? Is that person very important? However, you will know just who that person is after he is found. But I will likely end up being scolded once I find him. You should be a little smarter when the time comes. Otherwise, I will tell teacher that you failed to protect me adequately when we return. Even teacher is reluctant to scold you. Alright. This video will end here.